The stars had always been silent. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They built telescopes that could see billions of light years away. They searched and found nothing. Then on a cold morning in January 2147, the silence ended. The signal came from beyond Neptune. It was not random noise. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message repeating over and over in mathematical patterns that no human had created. Within hours, the greatest minds on Earth had decoded its meaning. Someone was coming. The United Earth Council gathered in Geneva. 3 days later, presidents and prime ministers sat around a massive circular table. Generals stood against the walls with their arms crossed. Scientists clutched tablets filled with data they barely understood. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of air. Recyclers, Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the head of the table. She was 60 years old with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands trembled slightly as she held the translated message. They call themselves the hegemony, she said, a coalition of 12 alien species. They have controlled this region of the galaxy for 60,000 years. She paused to let that number sink in. 60,000 years. Human civilization was barely 10,000 years old. These beings had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. They will arrive in our solar system in approximately 6 months. They are sending an ambassador to discuss. She looked down at the paper. Integration, asked the President of the United States. What does that mean? We don't know yet, but based on the tone of the message, I don't think it means friendship. She was right. The hegemony ship arrived exactly when they said it would. It was enormous, nearly 3 km long, shaped like a curved blade made of black metal. It stopped just beyond the orbit of Mars and broadcast a signal requesting communication. The world watched as the first video link between humanity and alien life was established. Billions of people stared at their screens, holding their breath, waiting to see what the universe had sent them. Ambassador Keth Varon appeared on the screen, and humanity got its first look at their visitors. He was tall, perhaps 2'1", with skin like gray leather stretched over sharp bones. His eyes were large and completely black, reflecting no light. His mouth was a thin line filled with small pointed teeth. Behind him stood 2 guards of the same species, holding weapons that pulsed with blue light. People of Earth, Kethan said. His voice was deep and cold. The hegemony greets you. Secretary General Santos sat in front of the camera, representing all of humanity. She kept her face calm even though her heart was pounding. Ambassador Keth Varon, on behalf of Earth, I welcome you. We have many questions and hope this can be the beginning of a peaceful relationship between our peoples. The alien made sound that might have been laughter. It was not a pleasant sound. Peaceful, yes. The hegemony always prefers peace. He leaned forward. Let me explain your situation, Secretary General. You are a young species on a small planet in an unremarkable solar system. You have achieved basic space travel, but you have no faster than light capability. You have no weapons that could threaten even the smallest hegemony patrol ship. You are, in the language of our coalition, pre-developmental. Santos felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. We may be young, but we have accomplished much. We would prefer to be treated as equals, equals. This time the laughter was clearer. The guards behind Keth Veron joined in. The hegemony has conquered over 300 species. We have ruled this part of the galaxy since before your ancestors climbed down from trees. You are not our equals. You are not even close to our equals. The transmission was being broadcast worldwide. Billions of people watched as their entire species was insulted and dismissed. Then what do you want from us? Santos asked. Keith V. Voren smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Hegemony offers you integration. Your planet will become a production world. Your people will serve in our labor caste. Your resources will fuel our expansion. In exchange, you will receive protection and guidance. You will learn your proper place in the galaxy, and if we refuse, the alien spread his hands. No one refuses the hegemony. The last species that tried was erased from existence 14,000 years ago. We do not even remember their name. He paused. You have 30 of your days to prepare for integration. Dismantle your military forces. Surrender your orbital stations. Prepare your population for work assignments. When we return, we expect full compliance, and if we don't comply, Keth Veron's black eyes seem to grow even darker. Then we will make an example of your world. We will reduce your cities to ash. We will sell your survivors to the labor markets of a dozen worlds, and we will use Earth as a warning to any other species that thinks they can resist the hegemony. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one in the council chamber spoke. Then slowly the shouting began. The next 30 days were chaos. Some governments wanted to surrender immediately. They argued that humanity had no chance against a civilization that had existed for 60,000 years. Better to survive as slaves than die as free people. Others wanted to fight even though they knew it was hopeless. They pointed to human history, to all the times people had stood against impossible odds. Sometimes courage mattered more than numbers. Most people were simply afraid. They held their families close and watched the sky, waiting for the alien ships to return. The United Earth Council met every day, arguing and debating and accomplishing nothing. The military prepared what defenses they could, but everyone knew it was pointless. Earth had a few hundred warships designed to patrol the solar system and handle small threats. The hegemony had conquered 300 species. It was like an ant preparing to fight a giant. On the 20th day, a message arrived requesting an emergency meeting. It came not from any government, but from a source that surprised everyone: the Deep Space Command, humanity's military arm for operations beyond Earth orbit. Fleet Admiral Helena Vance arrived in Geneva that evening. She was 63 years old, with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years, commanding everything from patrol boats to battle cruisers. She was known for two things: she never lost a battle and she never showed fear. She walked into the council chamber alone, carrying nothing but a small tablet. The world leaders stared at her with a mixture of hope and despair. Admiral Vance, Secretary General Santos said, "We were not expecting you. Is there a problem with our defense preparations?" Vance looked around the room slowly. Meeting every pair of eyes, there is no problem, there is an opportunity. An opportunity, the Russian president shook his head. What opportunity? We have seen the size of their ship, we have heard what they did to other species, we have no opportunity. Vance set her tablet on the table. 47 years ago, when I was a young lieutenant, I was assigned to a classified project. I was told that it was the most important work in human history. I was told that I could never speak of it to anyone. I was told that the fate of our species might one day depend on it. She pressed a button on the tablet. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing something that made everyone in the room gasp. Ships. Thousands of ships hidden in asteroid fields, buried beneath the surface of moons, concealed in the darkness between planets. Ships unlike anything Earth had ever publicly revealed. Ships bristling with weapons that seemed to defy physics. Ships that looked like they had been designed for one purpose: war. This is Project Consequence, Vance said. For nearly 50 years, the governments of Earth have been preparing for exactly this scenario. We knew, based on statistical analysis, that contact with hostile aliens was not just possible but likely. We decided to prepare. The council members stared at the display in shock. How is this possible? The Chinese president asked. The budget's the manpower, the technology. We would have noticed. You noticed exactly what we wanted you to notice. Every black budget item, every unexplained expense, every scientist who disappeared into classified work, it all fed into this project. Vance smiled grimly. Humanity has been preparing for invasion for half a century. We have ships, we have weapons, we have soldiers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. But can we win? Santos asked. They have conquered 300 species. They have 60,000 years of experience. Vance's smile faded. I cannot promise victory, but I can promise that we will not go quietly. I can promise that we will make them pay for every inch of space they try to take, and I can promise them something else. She looked up at the holographic display, at the hidden fleet that represented humanity's determination to survive. I can promise them consequences. 5 days before the deadline, Earth broadcast a message into space. It was sent on every frequency in every language the hegemony was known to use. It was short and simple. The soul system is sovereign human territory. Cross the heliosphere with hostile intent and you will not return. This is Earth's final warning. Ambassador Keth Voron received the message on his ship. Still waiting beyond Mars, he read it twice, then showed it to his subordinates. They laughed until their sides hurt. They threaten us, one of his aides said, wiping tears of amusement from his eyes. A species that cannot even leave their own system threatens the hegemony. They are prey animals, trying to roar like predators. Another added, it would be sad if it were not so funny. Keith V. Voron forwarded the message to the Hegemony High Council, along with his recommendation. Humans have rejected integration. They have issued threats. I recommend we make an example of them. Send the Third Conquest Fleet, destroy their military capabilities, and enslave the survivors. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy us. The High Council agreed. The Third Conquest Fleet was mobilized. 400 warships crewed by soldiers from 6 different hegemony species began the journey to Sol. These were not patrol Vessels or scout ships, these were. Conquest ships designed to break planetary defenses and reduce civilizations to rubble. The fleet had never failed. The fleet had never even been seriously challenged. Commander Yithal, who led the fleet, expected this mission to be routine: arrive, demonstrate overwhelming force, crush any resistance, begin the occupation. It was a process they had repeated dozens of times. He gave his crew a brief speech before they made the jump to Sol. The humans think they can resist us, he said. They are wrong. They are always wrong. In a few days Earth will belong to the hegemony, and we will add another species to our collection. His crew cheered. They looked forward to the conquest. Humans were said to be creative and adaptable, which meant they would make valuable slaves. The fleet jumped on Earth. Admiral Vance stood in the command center of the UES. Retribution. The ship was hidden in the shadow of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, completely invisible to any sensors the hegemony possessed. Around her, officers monitored displays showing the entire solar system, every human ship, every hidden platform, every weapon was marked and ready. 700 vessels of the main fleet, thousands of automated defense platforms, weapons that Earth had kept secret for decades, waiting for exactly this moment. Admiral, her communications officer, said, the hegemony fleet has entered the system. 400 ships approaching on standard vectors. Vance nodded. Do they see us? No, ma'am, they're not even scanning properly. They're coming in like they own the place. They think they do. Vance looked at the main display. 400 red dots moving toward the inner system, toward Earth, toward everything humanity had built. They think this will be easy. She thought about her grandchildren living in a small house in New Zealand. She thought about all the people on Earth who were looking at the sky right now, wondering if they would live to see next week. She thought about the thousands of men and women under her command, ready to fight and die for their species. Ma'am, her executive officer was watching her. Your orders. Vance straightened her uniform. She had been preparing for this moment for 40 years. Every simulation, every training exercise, every sleepless night had led to this. Send them one last message, she said. Let them know they were warned. The message was transmitted. It said, you were warned. You chose to cross. Now face the consequence. Commander Yithra read the message on his bridge. He deleted it without responding. These humans and their pathetic attempts at intimidation. In a few hours he would properly. Alarm screamed across his ship. Commander, his sensor officer shouted. Contacts, multiple contacts appearing on all vectors. Yithel stared at his display in disbelief. Where moments ago there had been nothing but empty space, ships were appearing, not dozens, 100, 700 human vessels, materializing out of the darkness like ghosts. That's impossible, he whispered. We scanned this entire system. There was nothing here. They were hidden. Commander, stealth technology we've never seen before. Before Yithal could respond, the human ships opened fire. The first volley hit the hegemony fleet like a hammer from an angry god. Ships that had survived dozens of battles simply disappeared. Shields that had held against species with thousands of years of technological development collapsed in seconds. The darkness of space lit up with explosions. Return fire, Yeth screamed. All ships return fire, but there was nothing to fire at. The human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, appearing and disappearing, striking from angles that made no sense. The hegemony weapons that did fire seemed to pass through empty space where ships had been moments before. In 11 minutes 381, hegemony ships were destroyed. Ythal watched in horror as his fleet, the pride of the hegemony, was torn apart by a species that was supposed to be primitive and helpless. His flagship shook as weapons fire struck its shields. Commander, our shields are failing. Retreat, Yeth shouted. All ships retreat. Jump to safe. His ship shook again, harder this time. Lights flickered, consoles exploded in showers of sparks, then everything went dark when Ythal regained consciousness. His ship was drifting, dead in space. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow over the bridge. Most of his crew were unconscious or injured, and on his view screen he saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Human ships surrounding his crippled vessel, not firing, just watching, waiting. A transmission came through on the emergency channel. Human face appeared on his screen. Female, old by their standards, with gray hair and cold eyes. Commander Ythal, Admiral Vance said, "Welcome to Sol. As you can see, things did not go as you expected." Ythal tried to speak, but could only manage a hoarse whisper. How is this possible?" Vance tilted her head slightly. "You made a mistake that many species make, Commander. You assumed that because we were young, we were weak. You assumed that because we were small, we were helpless. You assumed that our warnings were bluffs." She leaned closer to the camera. "We do not bluff, Commander. We do not threaten. We promise, and we keep our promises." Ythal felt something he had never experienced before in his centuries of service. Something no hegemony commander had felt in thousands of years. Fear. What will you do with us?" Admiral Vance smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not a kind one either. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. "That, Commander, depends entirely on what message your hegemony needs to receive. We gave you one warning. You ignored it. Now you will help us deliver a different kind of message." The transmission ended. Ythal sat in the darkness of his ruined bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, and realized that everything the hegemony believed about the universe had just been proven wrong. The humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous, and the hegemony had just made the worst mistake in its 60,000-year history. 47 years before the hegemony arrived, young scientist named Dr. Sarah Chen sat in a small conference room beneath the mountains of Switzerland. The room had no windows. The walls were thick concrete. The only door required 3 separate security codes to open. She was 28 years old, brilliant and terrified. Around her sat 11 other people, scientists, military officers, and 2 politicians whose names she did not recognize. They had all been brought here in secret. They had all signed documents promising never to reveal what they were about to hear. An elderly man in a general's uniform stood at the front of the room. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "What I am about to tell you will change your understanding of our world. It will change your understanding of our future, and it will change your understanding of why we brought you here." He pressed a button, and a display screen came to life behind Him, for the past 15 years, a secret project has been analyzing a simple question: why is the universe so quiet? We call it the Fermi paradox. The galaxy is billions of years old. It contains billions of stars. Statistically, intelligent life should be everywhere. So where is everyone? Dr. Chen had wondered about this herself. Every scientist had. We have considered many explanations. General Webb continued. Perhaps intelligent life is rare. Perhaps technology always destroys the species that creates it. Perhaps the distances are simply too great. He paused, but we have settled on a different explanation, one that is supported by mathematical models and probability analysis, one that is frankly terrifying. He changed the display. A map of the galaxy appeared, with certain regions highlighted in red. We believe the universe is quiet because someone is making it quiet. We believe there are predator civilizations out there, ancient and powerful, that prey on younger species. They find them, they conquer them, and they either destroy them or enslave them. The silence we hear is not the absence of life, it is the sound of life being suppressed. The room was completely still. We cannot prove this theory, Webb said. We may never be able to prove it, but we have decided that hoping we are wrong is not a strategy. We have decided to prepare for the worst. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. We are going to build a fleet. We are going to develop weapons. We are going to train soldiers, and we are going to do it in complete secret, hidden from the public and from most governments, because if we are right, someday something is going to come for us, and when it does, we need to be ready. General Webb pressed another button. Technical specifications began scrolling across the screen. Ship designs, weapon concepts, training programs, budget requirements. We call it Project Consequence. Its goal is simple: to ensure that any species that attacks humanity will face consequences so severe that they will never attack us again. Dr. Chen raised her hand. Her voice shook slightly when she spoke. General, even if we build all of this, how can we possibly hope to compete with a civilization that might be thousands or millions of years more advanced? Webb smiled grimly. We don't hope to compete, Dr. Chen. We hope to survive, and the key to survival is making your enemy decide that destroying you is more trouble than it's worth. He changed the display again. This time it showed a formula, complex and strange. This is why you're here, Dr. Chen. You published a paper last year about theoretical applications of quantum field manipulation. You thought it was purely theoretical. You were wrong. We have reason to believe it can be made into a weapon unlike anything that has ever existed. Dr. Chen stared at the formula, her own work twisted into something she had never imagined. You want me to help you build weapons? I want you to help us survive. Webb's voice was gentle but firm. You can say no. You can walk out of this room and return to your normal life, but I believe you understand what's at stake. I believe you understand why this matters. Dr. Chen thought about her family, her parents in Shanghai, her sister in California, the billions of people on Earth who had no idea what might be coming for them. When do we start? She asked. General Webb smiled. We started 15 years ago. You're just catching up. For the next 47 years, Project Consequence grew in secret. Beneath the surface of the moon, engineers carved out massive shipyards They worked in shifts around the clock, building vessels designed by scientists who had devoted their lives to imagining how to fight an enemy they had never seen. In the asteroid belt, mining operations extracted materials that officially did not exist, rare elements that Earth's governments insisted were too difficult to obtain were shipped in massive quantities to hidden processing facilities on Mars. Soldiers trained in specially constructed environments. They practiced combat scenarios against simulated enemies with superior technology. They learned to fight in zero gravity, in extreme temperatures, in conditions that would kill an ordinary person. They were told nothing about who their enemy might be. They only knew that someday they would be needed. The money came from 1,000 different sources, black budgets buried within larger programs, corporations that existed only on paper, donations from wealthy individuals who had been told the truth and wanted to help. Every government on Earth contributed, though most of their citizens never knew. Thousands of scientists worked on weapons that defied conventional physics. They built missiles that could phase through shields. They developed energy weapons that could tear matter apart at the molecular level. They created stealth technology so advanced that a ship could sit beside you and you would never know it was there. Dr. Chen, now Dr. Sarah Chen Webb, after marrying the general's son, led the most important project of all. Her theoretical work on quantum field manipulation had become something real, something dangerous, a weapon that could in theory destroy anything. She called it the consequence engine. It manipulates the quantum field itself, she explained to the review board. It doesn't just damage matter, it convinces matter that it shouldn't exist. Anything caught in its field simply stops being. The board members exchanged worried looks. Is there any defense against it? Dr. Chen shook her head. Not that we can imagine. The effect is instantaneous and complete. If it works as designed, nothing in the universe could survive a direct hit. And if it doesn't work as designed, she was quiet for a moment, then it might unmake everything within a significant radius, including whoever fires it. The board approved the weapon anyway. They had no choice. If something was coming for humanity, they needed every advantage they could get, even dangerous ones. As the decades passed, Project Consequence evolved. The first generation of leaders retired or died. General Webb passed away in 2119, still believing that first contact was imminent. He was wrong by nearly 30 years, but his preparations would prove correct. Helena Vance joined the project in 2098. She was 19 years old, fresh from the Naval Academy. Idealistic and determined, she believed in the mission because she had been raised by parents who believed in it. Her mother had been a project scientist. Her father had been a ship captain in the Hidden Fleet. Service to humanity was in her blood. She rose through the ranks quickly. She was smart, tough, and willing to make hard decisions. By 2130, she commanded her own ship. By 2140, she commanded a battle group. By 2145, she was fleet admiral in charge of the entire secret navy that humanity had spent half a century building. 700 warships, 47,000 personnel, weapons that could crack planets, all of it hidden, waiting, preparing for an enemy that might never come. Some people within the project began to doubt. Maybe the Fermi paradox had a different Explanation: maybe they had wasted trillions of dollars and millions of person-hours on a threat that didn't exist. Admiral Vance never doubted. She looked at the galaxy and saw what General Webb had seen all those years ago. She saw silence where there should have been noise. She saw emptiness where there should have been life, and she knew with complete certainty that something was out there. When the hegemony signal arrived in January 2147, she felt no surprise, only grim satisfaction. Finally, she said when her aide brought her the news, "Wake up the fleet, tell everyone their training is over, the real thing is here." The battle in the Sol system lasted 11 minutes. To the hegemony soldiers who survived, it felt like an eternity. Commander Yethel watched from his crippled flagship as human ships moved through the wreckage of his fleet. They were collecting escape pods and rescue beacons. They were pulling survivors from disabled vessels. They were being careful. This confused him more than anything else. The hegemony did not take prisoners. When they conquered a species, they either enslaved the survivors or killed them. There was no in between. These humans had just destroyed the most powerful fleet the hegemony had sent anywhere in centuries. They should be celebrating their victory, not worrying about enemy survivors. Commander, one of his officers, said weakly. The male had a deep gash across his face and one arm hung useless at his side. "What do we do?" "We wait," Ythral said. "We have no choice." Hours passed. The human ships completed their work. Then a shuttle approached Ythal and LT Unk and GT's flagship and docked with the emergency airlock. Armed humans entered the ship. They were smaller than Ythal expected, barely half his height, but they moved with precision and confidence. Their weapons were steady, their eyes were cold. Female human approached him. She wore uniform covered in markings he didn't understand. Her hair was brown, cut short. Her face was young. "Commander Ythal, I'm Captain Tors. You and your crew are now prisoners of the United Earth Fleet." Ythral tried to stand tall despite his injuries. "The hegemony does not surrender. We would rather die then." "No one asked you to surrender," Tors interrupted. "Your ship is disabled. Your fleet is destroyed. Your options are come with us peacefully, or we leave you here to suffocate. When your life support fails, your choice." Ythal hesitated. Every instinct told him to fight, to die with honor, but something in the human's eyes stopped him. It wasn't cruelty or hatred. It was something worse, indifference. She didn't care whether he lived or died. She was offering him a choice and would accept either answer without emotion. His death meant nothing to her. "We will come with you," he said quietly. Tors nodded. "Smart choice. Follow my team. Don't touch anything. Don't try anything stupid. We've already killed enough of you today." The prisoners were taken to a facility on one of Saturn's moons. It was clean, well lit, and surprisingly comfortable. Each prisoner had their own room with a bed, a bathroom, and a small window showing the stars outside. They were given food appropriate to their species, medical care for their injuries, even entertainment devices loaded with human media translated into their languages. It was not what they expected. "They're trying to break us," one officer insisted. "This is a psychological technique. They'll start the torture soon." But the torture never came. Days turned into weeks. The humans asked questions, but they were polite. Questions: what was life like in the hegemony? How did their technology work? What did they know about other species? In the galaxy, when prisoners refused to answer, the humans simply shrugged and moved on. No threats, no punishment. Just acceptance. Commander Yithral requested a meeting with whoever was in charge. To his surprise, the request was granted. Admiral Helena Vance entered his room 3 days later. She was alone. Without guards, she sat down across from him as if they were colleagues, discussing business. Commander, you wanted to speak with me. Yithral studied. Sorry. This was the female who had commanded the human fleet. This was the person who had destroyed 400 hegemony ships in 11 minutes. She looked ordinary, old, tired. Why are you doing this? He asked. Doing what? Treating us well, feeding us, caring for our injuries. You are our enemy. You should be interrogating us, torturing us, making us suffer for what we tried to do to your world. Vance was quiet for a moment, then she said something that Yether would never forget. We're not treating you well because we're weak. Commander, we're treating you well because we're strong. Weak species torture their prisoners because they're afraid, because they need information desperately, because they have no other way to control their enemies. We're not afraid of you. We don't need your information desperately. We have complete control of the situation. She leaned forward slightly. We're treating you well because we can afford to. Because showing mercy when you have absolute power says something important. It says that we're not animals. It says that we're not like you. We are not animals either. Yithral protested. No. What would the hegemony have done if your fleet had won, if Earth had been conquered? Yithral was silent. He knew the answer. They both did. That's the difference between us. Vance said. You came here to enslave or destroy us. We defended ourselves. We won. And now we're going to let you go. Let us go. Yithral couldn't believe what he was hearing. You can't be serious. Completely serious. In 3 days we're going to put every survivor from your fleet into shuttles. We're going to give you enough supplies to reach hegemony space, and we're going to set you free. Why? This makes no sense. Admiral Vance stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars for a long moment. Because we need messengers, she said finally. We need someone to go back to your hegemony and tell them what happened here. We need them to see the recordings, to hear the stories, to understand exactly what they're dealing with. She turned back to face him. We gave your leaders one warning. They ignored it. Now we're going to give them a different kind of warning, one they won't be able to ignore. What kind of warning? Vance smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, the kind that shows up in orbit around their home world. Yeth felt his blood turn to ice. You're attacking Vareth Prime, not attacking. Visiting. Our fleet left Sol 3 hours ago. 4,700 vessels are on their way to your capital right now. They'll arrive before you do, even if you leave immediately. 4,700. That's impossible. You only had 700 ships in the battle. In that battle. Yes, we have more, many more, and we're bringing all of them. Yithral's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 60,000 years. They had never faced a threat like this. They had never even imagined a threat like this. What do you want? He whispered. We want peace, real peace. We want your hegemony to recognize human sovereignty and leave us alone forever. We want to build relationships with species who are willing to treat us as equals, and if the High Council refuses. Admiral Vance's smile faded, her eyes became hard. Then we will demonstrate what our weapons can do to planetary infrastructure. We will start with military installations, then government buildings, then population centers. We will keep demonstrating until they agree to our terms or until there's nothing left to demonstrate on. She walked to the door and paused. Go home, Commander. Tell your leaders what you saw. Tell them what we did to your fleet in 11 minutes and tell them to make the smart choice when our ships arrive, because we've already proven that we can destroy them. The only question is whether we'll have to. She left. Ythel sat alone in his room, staring at the stars, trying to understand how everything the hegemony believed had been proven wrong. In a single day, the humans were not prey, they were not primitive, they were not weak, they were humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Ythel stood at the observation window of his shuttle and watched the Sol system shrink behind him. His ship was one of 19 that had survived the battle, 19 out of 400. The rest were debris now floating in the darkness, monuments to the hegemony's arrogance. Around him, 30,000 survivors sat in silence. Some were injured and wrapped in bandages provided by human medics. Some stared at nothing, their minds still trying to process what had happened. Some wept quietly, mourning friends and comrades who would never come home. They had been given everything they needed: food, water, fuel, medical supplies. The humans had even repaired the most critical systems on their shuttles. It was the kind of treatment the hegemony reserved for important allies, not defeated enemies. Ythral did not understand these humans. He had spent his entire life learning that the galaxy was simple. There were predators and there was prey. The strong took what they wanted, the weak served or died. This was the natural order. This was how things had always been, but the humans did not follow the natural order. They had one completely. They could have killed every survivor. They could have tortured them for information. They could have kept them as prisoners forever. Instead, they had shown mercy. Why? His second in command approached. Lieutenant Voss's Rao was young, barely a century old, with a long scar across her face from where a console had exploded during the battle. Commander, the crew is asking questions. They want to know what happened. They want to know how we lost. We underestimated them, Ythel said simply. We assumed they were like every other species we have conquered. We were wrong, but how? They are so young. Their civilization is barely developed. How could they defeat us so easily? Ythral thought about Admiral Vance's words, about strength and mercy, about the difference between the hegemony and humanity. They spent 50 years preparing for us, he said. While we grew comfortable with our power, they were building weapons and ships and training soldiers. They knew we were coming before we even knew they existed, and when we arrived they were ready. But our technology is superior. Our ships are faster, stronger, more advanced. Our technology is older. There is a difference. Yeth turned away from the window. We have not faced a real threat in thousands of years. We have grown lazy. Our weapons are the same weapons our ancestors used. Our tactics are the same tactics that worked against species that could barely fight back. He looked at the data chip in his hand. The humans had given one to every shuttle. Full Recordings of the battle from every angle. They wanted the hegemony to see exactly what had happened. The humans are different. They came from a world that was trying to kill them from the day they evolved. They survived ice ages and predators and diseases and each other. They never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting, never stopped preparing for the next threat. Lieutenant Vasra was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that everyone was thinking: what happens when we return home? What happens when the High Council sees these recordings? Yeth did not answer immediately. He walked to the navigation console and checked their course. 2 weeks to hegemony space. 2 weeks to figure out how to explain to the most powerful leaders in the galaxy that they had just lost a war before it even properly started. I don't know, he admitted, but the humans said their fleet is already heading to Varith Prime. They will arrive before we do. Whatever happens next, it will not be our decision. The journey home was long and quiet. Survivors had little to do except think about what had happened. Some reviewed the battle recordings over and over, trying to find some explanation, some mistake the humans had made that could be exploited next time. They found nothing. The human tactics had been perfect. Their weapons had been overwhelming. Their coordination had been flawless. Others talked among themselves in hushed voices. They shared stories about the battle, about comrades who had died, about the strange mercy the humans had shown them. One conversation spread through the shuttles like a virus. A young soldier named Crixtall had been captured during the battle. His escape pod had been picked up by a human ship, and he had spent 3 days as a prisoner before being transferred to the shuttles. During that time, he had talked extensively with his human guards. They asked about my family. Crix said they wanted to know if I had children, if my parents were still alive, what my home was like. They seemed genuinely curious. Why would they care? Another soldier asked. I don't know, but one of them showed me pictures of her own family, her mate and her young offspring. She said she was fighting to protect them. She said she didn't hate us, she just wanted us to leave her people alone. This confused the hegemony soldiers. In their culture, warriors did not think about family during combat. They did not show weakness to enemies. They certainly did not share personal information with prisoners. They are strange creatures. An officer muttered, soft and sentimental. It is amazing they were able to defeat us at all. Perhaps that is why they defeated us, Commander. Yithril said. Everyone turned to look at him. He had been standing in the door, listening. I don't understand, Commander. Yithril walked into the room and sat down among the common soldiers. This was not normal behavior for a commander, but nothing was normal anymore. We fight for the glory of the hegemony, he said. We fight because we are told to fight. We fight because it is our duty. But what do we fight for? Really, what would we die for? No one answered. The humans fight for their families. They fight for their homes. They fight for each other. They have something to lose, and they know exactly what it is. Perhaps that makes them fight harder. Perhaps that makes them refuse to surrender even when they should. He thought about Admiral Vance, standing alone in the prisoners' quarters, explaining why she had shown mercy because we can afford to, because showing mercy when you have absolute power says something important. We have grown too comfortable, Yithril continued. We conquer species that Cannot fight back, we destroy. Civilizations that pose no real threat. We have forgotten what it means to face an enemy that is truly dangerous. Humans reminded us on the 10th day of the journey. They received a transmission from Hegemony Space. Commander Yithal gathered the senior officers from all 19 shuttles for a conference call. What they heard confirmed their worst fears. The human fleet arrived at Varith Prime 3 days ago. The Hegemony Communications Officer reported. His voice was strained. 4,700 vessel. They have established a sphere formation around our home world. They are not attacking, but they have made it clear that they will if we do not negotiate. What is the High Council doing? Yithral asked. They are debating. Many voices call for counterattack. The combined hegemony fleet outnumbers the humans. Some believe we can win. They believe wrong, Yithral said flatly. I watch 400 of our best ships destroyed. In 11 minutes, the humans barely suffered any casualties. Our technology cannot match theirs. Our tactics cannot counter theirs. If we attack, we will lose. The High Council may not agree. Commander Chancellor Morithvex is under pressure from the military factions. They see this as an insult that must be answered with force. Yithra closed his eyes. The fools, the absolute fools. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. I have recordings, he said, full censored data from the battle. I have testimony from 30,000 survivors. I have evidence that will prove beyond any doubt that attacking the humans would be suicide. Can you transmit the recordings? I will transmit them now. Make sure the High Council sees them. Make sure everyone sees them. The hegemony needs to understand what happened in that system. He began the upload. The files were massive, containing hours of footage from hundreds of ships. It would take time to transmit, but when it was done, no one could deny the truth. Commander, the communications officer said hesitantly. There is one more thing. The humans have made their demands. They want formal recognition of human sovereignty. They want a guarantee that no hegemony ship will ever enter their space without permission, and they want something else. What? They want us to release all slave species, every civilization we have conquered in the last 1,000 years. They want them freed. Officers on the call began shouting. This was impossible, outrageous. The hegemony's entire economy depended on slave labor. Releasing them would cause chaos, but Yithal remained calm. They want us to become something different, he said quietly. They want us to stop being conquerors. We cannot agree to that. The hegemony would collapse. The hegemony may collapse anyway. Look at what happened to our fleet. Look at what their ships can do. If they wanted to, they could destroy our home world. They could annihilate our species. Instead, they are offering us a choice. Some choice. Surrender everything we have built or die. Yith shook his head. No. Become something better or face the consequences of what we are. That is the choice. The other officers stared at him in disbelief. Commander, you almost sound like you agree with them. Yithra was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that would have been treason a month ago. I spent 3 days in human custody. I was treated with kindness and respect. I was given food and medical care and comfortable quarters. And I asked myself, what would we have done to them if we had won? What did we plan to do to them? No one answered. They all knew we planned to enslave their entire species. We planned to strip their world of resources. We planned to destroy their culture and break their spirit and use them as tools until they were worn out and useless. He looked around the virtual conference room. The humans showed us mercy when they had every reason to show us cruelty. Perhaps they deserve better from us than we planned to give them. Perhaps the galaxy deserves better from us. The shuttles arrived at the edge of Hegman space 4 days later. What they found was not what they expected. The human fleet was still in position around Vareth Prime, but the situation had changed. The combined hegemony fleet, every warship from all 12 member species had assembled in response. Over 3,000 vessels, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen, faced off against the smaller human force, and nothing was happening. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the flagship, Lieutenant Vasra reported. High Council wants a full report. They want you to come aboard immediately. Yithral nodded. Dacus at the nearest station. I'll take a shuttle to the flagship. 2 hours later he stood before the High Council of the Hegemony. The chamber was enormous, designed to intimidate. 12 thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by the leader of a member species. Screens behind them showed the tactical situation. Thousands of ships facing each other, neither side moving. Chancellor Morith Vivef sat at the center, ancient and powerful. He had ruled the hegemony for 400 years. He had overseen the conquest of 37 species, and now he faced something he had never faced before, an enemy he could not defeat. Commander Yithral, the Chancellor said, you have returned. Tell us what happened. Yithro told them everything: the battle, the destruction of the fleet, the capture and imprisonment, the mercy the humans had shown, the message they had sent. When he finished, the chamber was silent. You expect us to believe this? One of the council members demanded. You expect us to believe that a species barely capable of interstellar travel destroyed 400 of our ships in 11 minutes? The recordings are available for your review, Yithral said calmly. 30,000 survivors can testify to what they saw. The evidence is undeniable. Then we must counterattack with overwhelming force. The combined fleet has 3,000 ships. The humans have only with respect. Counselor, the humans have 4,700 ships. Here they have more at home, and their weapons are unlike anything we have ever seen. Yithral's voice was firm. I watched our shields fail against their weapons. I watched our missiles pass through empty space where their ships had been moments before. We cannot win this fight. Then what do you suggest? Chancellor Morith Vex asked. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. Yithral hesitated. What he was about to say would end his career. It might end his life. But he had spent 2 weeks thinking about it, and he had reached a conclusion he could not ignore. I suggest we accept their terms, all of them. The chamber exploded in outrage. Council members shouted. Military leaders demanded his arrest. But Chancellor Morith Vex raised a hand, and slowly the room fell silent. Explain your reasoning, Commander. The humans could destroy us. They could reduce our worlds to ash and scatter our people across the galaxy. Instead, they are offering us peace. They are offering us a chance to survive. Yes, their terms are harsh. Yes, they require us to change everything about ourselves, but we will still exist. We will still have Our homes and our families and our futures. He looked around the chamber. The alternative is extinction. I have seen what their weapons can do. If we fight them, we will lose, not just this battle, but everything, every ship, every world, every member of every species in the hegemony. Is our pride worth that much? Is our power worth more than our survival? The chamber was silent. Chancellor Morith stood. He was very old, 900 years, and he moved slowly, but his eyes were sharp. Contact the humans, he said. Tell them we agree to negotiate. The military leaders began to protest, but the chancellor silenced them with a look. I have ruled this hegemony for 4 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have learned one lesson above all others: survival is more important than pride. The humans have beaten us. Fighting them further will only ensure our destruction. He turned to Yithal. You will lead our negotiating team, Commander. You have met their admiral. You understand them better than any of us. Find a way to end this without more bloodshed. Yithral bowed. Yes, Chancellor. As he left the chamber, he allowed himself a small moment of hope. Maybe the hegemony could change. Maybe the galaxy could change. Maybe the humans would teach them something new. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and looked at the alien world filling her viewscreen. Var Prime, the capital of the hegemony, a planet that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 60,000 years, and now it was surrounded by human ships. She had not slept in 3 days. The journey from Seoul had taken 17 days, moving at speeds that the hegemony's best scientists would have said were impossible. Her fleet had arrived to find the aliens in complete chaos, scrambling to assemble a response, sending frantic messages, demanding to know how humans had traveled so fast. She had not answered their messages. She had simply waited. Now, 4 days later, the situation had finally stabilized. The combined hegemony fleet floated nearby, 3,000 warships from 12 different species. They outnumbered her fleet, but not by much. And after what had happened in Seoul, numbers alone meant nothing. Admiral, her communications officer, said, "We're receiving a transmission from the hegemony flagship. They want to negotiate." Vance felt something loosen in her chest. It was what she had hoped for, but not what she had expected. Hegemony had ruled through fear and force for thousands of years. She had thought they would choose to fight, even knowing they would lose. Perhaps she had underestimated them, put them through. The screen flickered and she found herself looking at Chancellor Morith. He was ancient, his gray skin wrinkled and spotted with age, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, calculating. This was a being who had survived 900 years of political intrigue. He was not to be underestimated. "Admiral Vance," he said. His voice was deep and formal. "I am Chancellor Morith of the hegemony. I believe we have matters to discuss." "Chancellor, I'm glad you've decided to talk instead of fight. I have seen the recordings from your system. I have spoken to Commander Yithal. I understand what your weapons can do." He paused. "I am old, Admiral. I have seen many things, but I have never seen anything like what you did to our fleet. We warned you. Your ambassador ignored us. Your fleet ignored us. We had no choice but to demonstrate that we were serious." "Yes, you demonstrated very effectively." The Chancellor's expression was unreadable. you could have destroyed our home world by now. You have the power. Why haven't you? Vance had expected this question. She had spent the entire journey preparing her answer. Because destruction is easy, building something is hard. We could kill you. But that wouldn't solve anything. Another species would rise to take your place. Another empire would form. The cycle would continue forever. She leaned forward slightly. We want something different. We want to break the cycle. We want to build a galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquer, where civilizations trade and share knowledge instead of fighting over territory. Where being different doesn't mean being enemies. The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. You speak of ideals. The hegemony deals in reality. Then here is reality. You cannot defeat us. You can fight us, but you will lose. You can refuse our terms, but we will enforce them anyway. The only question is how much suffering happens between now and the inevitable outcome. And what is that outcome? A galaxy where humanity and the hegemony exist as equals, where your slave species are freed, where conquest is replaced by cooperation. That is what we want. That is what we will accept. Nothing less. Chancellor Morithvex studied her through the screen. Behind him, she could see other council members, watching their alien faces, showing various expressions of fear and anger and uncertainty. You ask us to give up everything we have built. We ask you to build something better. The hegemony has lasted 60,000 years through force. Imagine how long it could last through cooperation. Imagine what you could accomplish with allies instead of slaves. Idealism, the Chancellor said again, but there was something in his voice now, something that might have been curiosity. Commander Yithril told me something interesting, Vance continued. He said that the humans he met were not what he expected. He said we showed mercy when we could have shown cruelty. He said we treated our prisoners with kindness. This confused him greatly. I'm sure it did. Hegemony doesn't understand kindness. You see it as weakness, but kindness is not weakness. Chancellor, kindness is what separates civilization from barbarism. Kindness is what makes life worth living. She stood up from her command chair and walked closer to the screen. We are offering you kindness. We could destroy you. We could take revenge for what your ambassador said, for what your fleet tried to do. Instead, we are offering you peace, real peace, a chance to be something more than conquerors. The Chancellor was quiet for a long time. Behind him, the council members whispered among themselves, I need time. He finally said, these decisions cannot be made quickly. The council must debate. Our people must be consulted. How much time? 24 of your hours. Vance nodded. 24 hours, but Chancellor, understand this. We have waited 50 years for this moment. We have prepared for this meeting since before your ambassador knew Earth existed. We will not wait forever. I understand. Transmission ended. For the next 24 hours, both fleets waited. On the hegemony side, chaos reigned. Council members argued. Military leaders demanded action. Citizens across a dozen worlds watched the news feeds and wondered what was happening. The mighty hegemony, rulers of the galaxy, was being dictated to by a species that had been unknown 6 months ago. Some called for war. They pointed to the numbers. 3,000 hegemony ships against 4,700 human ships. The odds were not impossible. And even if they lost, better to die fighting than to surrender everything their ancestors had built. Others called for peace they had seen. The recordings from Seoul they had watched 400 ships destroyed in 11 minutes. They understood that numbers meant nothing against weapons that could not be stopped. Commander Yithol spoke. To anyone who would listen, I was there, he said again and again. I saw what happened. We cannot win this fight. We can only choose how we want to lose. On the human side, things were quieter. Admiral Vance allowed her crew to rest. In shifts, she walked through her ship, talking to soldiers and officers, thanking them for their service, reminding them why they were here. She stopped at the observation deck and found a young ensign staring at Vareth, primed through the transparent hull. First time seeing an alien world, she asked. The ensign jumped to attention. Admiral, I'm sorry I didn't see you at ease. This isn't an inspection. Vance walked to stand beside him. I asked you a question. Yes, ma'am. First time I grew up on Earth in a small town in Canada. I never thought I'd leave the planet, let alone be part of this. He gestured at the fleet, at the alien world, at everything around them. What's your name? Ensign Thomas Chen, ma'am. Chen Webb. Actually, my grandmother was one of the original Project Consequent scientists. Vance smiled. Dr. Sarah Chen Webb. I knew her. She was brilliant. She invented some of the weapons we're carrying on this very ship. She never talked about it, the project, I mean. She died when I was 12, and I always wondered why she spent so much time away from the family. Now I understand. She gave her life to protect humanity. So did thousands of others, scientists, engineers, soldiers, pilots, people who worked in secret for decades, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Vance looked at Vareth Prime, and now here we are. Do you think they'll accept our terms, Admiral? I don't know. I hope so. I didn't come here to start a war. I came here to end one before it could begin. And if they don't accept, Vance was silent for a moment. Then she said, then we and LT Unc and GT LL do what we have to do. And I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if there was something else I could have said, some other way I could have handled this. She put a hand on the young ensign's shoulder. That's the burden of command, ensign. You make the best decisions you can with the information you have, and then you live with the consequences. The 24 hours passed slowly. When the time was nearly up, Admiral Vance returned to the bridge. Her officers were at their stations monitoring the hegemony fleet for any sign of hostile movement. So far everything was quiet. Any response from the council? She asked. Not yet, Admiral. They have 2 minutes remaining. Vance sat down in her command chair. She had done everything she could. She had made her case. She had offered peace. Now the decision was in someone else's hands. The minutes ticked by. 1, 2. Admiral, incoming transmission from the hegemony flagship. Put it through. Chancellor Morithvex appeared on the screen. He looked tired, older than he had the day before. Behind him, the council members were assembled, their faces grim. Admiral Vance, the hegemony High Council has reached a decision. Vance held her breath. After much debate, we have agreed to accept your terms, all of them. The bridge erupted in cheers. Officers hugged each other. Someone started crying. Vance felt tears in her own eyes, though she fought to keep her face calm. Chancellor, you've made a wise decision. I do not know if it is wise. I know only that it is Necessary. Morith Vex's voice was heavy. We will recognize human sovereignty. We will release the slave species. We will dismantle the conquest fleets. Everything your people demanded, we will provide, and in return we ask only that you give us time. Chain cannot happen overnight. Our civilization has been built on conquest. For 60,000 years, transforming it will take time, patience, and help from those who understand what we are trying to become. Vance nodded slowly. We can provide that. Advisors, teachers, trade partners, whatever you need. There is one more thing. The Chancellor hesitated. Commander Yithal spoke highly of you. He said you were honorable. He said you showed mercy when you had every reason to show cruelty. I tried. I am old, Admiral. I will not live much longer. But I want to understand something before I die. You could have destroyed us. You could have taken revenge. Why didn't you? Vance thought about the question for a long moment. It was the same question Yithal had asked, the same question she had been asked 100 times during the journey to Vath Prime. Because revenge is easy, she finally said. It's the simplest thing in the world to hurt someone who hurt you, but it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't build anything. It just creates more pain and more hatred. She looked at the ancient alien on her screen. We came from a violent world, Chancellor. We spent most of our history killing each other over land and resources and ideas. We were very good at destruction, but somewhere along the way we learned that destruction wasn't enough. We learned that we had to build something too. And what are you trying to build? A future, a galaxy where our children can grow up without fearing what's hiding in the darkness. Civilization where species work together instead of against each other. Universe where the silence between stars is filled with conversation instead of fear. Morith Vex was quiet for a long moment. That is a beautiful dream, Admiral. It's more than a dream. It's a choice, and today you made the right one. The signing of the Accord of Soul took place 1 week later. It happened on a neutral station constructed specifically for the purpose, built in the empty space between the two fleets. Representatives from all 12 hegemony species attended, along with delegates from Earth and the surviving humans on Mars and the outer colonies. Admiral Vance signed on behalf of humanity. Chancellor Morith Vex signed on behalf of the hegemony. Commander Yithal watched from the sidelines, feeling something he had never felt before. Hope. The accord was comprehensive. It recognized human sovereignty over the Sol system and any territories humanity claimed in the future. It guaranteed that no hegemony vessel would enter human space without explicit permission. It established trade agreements and cultural exchanges. It created a framework for the gradual release of all slave species over a period of 50 years. And it included something that Vance had insisted on, a mutual defense pact. If any external threat emerged, humanity and the hegemony would face it together. You think there are more threats out there? Morith Vex asked when this provision was discussed. I think the galaxy is very large and very old, Vance replied, and I think that anything that survived out there for millions of years did so by being dangerous. We should be prepared. After the signing there was a reception. For the first time in history, humans and hegemony members mingled freely, sharing drinks and stories and awkward attempts at humor. Commander Yithal found himself standing next to Admiral Vance, Both of them. Watching the celebration, I still don't understand you, he admitted. You had absolute power over us, you could have demanded anything. Why were you so reasonable? Vance smiled. Because power isn't the goal, it's just a tool. We wanted peace, Commander, real lasting peace, and you don't get that by humiliating your enemies. You get it by turning enemies into partners. Is that what we are now? Partners. We're trying to be. It won't be easy. We have thousands of years of hostility to overcome, but I believe it's possible. She looked out at the celebration. My grandmother used to say that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its friends, it's how it treats its enemies. We had a chance to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. I think we passed the test. Yithra was silent. For a moment, I think you did too, he said quietly. Outside the station, human and hegemony ships floated side by side, their running lights blinking in synchronized rhythm. It was a small thing, but it meant something. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in 60,000 years, it was changing. For the better. 50 years had passed since the Accord of Soul. The galaxy was a different place now. The old hegemony still existed, but it had changed so much that the elders barely recognized it. The conquest fleets were gone, converted into trade vessels and exploration ships. The slave species had been freed, their worlds returned to them, their cultures beginning to rebuild. It had not been easy. There had been rebellions and protests and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. Some species refused to forgive what had been done to them. Some hegemony members refused to accept the new order. For years, chaos had threatened to consume everything. But slowly, painfully, the galaxy had found a new balance, and at the center of it all was humanity. Human ships traveled to every corner of known space. Now, human engineers helped rebuild worlds that had been stripped by centuries of exploitation. Human doctors shared medical technology that saved millions of lives. Human teachers established schools where children of 100 different species learned side by side. It was not the empire that the old hegemony would have built. It was something stranger, messier, more difficult to control. It was a partnership. Ambassador Yithol stood at the window of his office on Luna and watched Earth rise over the horizon. He was old now, very old, well past the normal lifespan of his species, but he had refused to retire. There was still too much work to do. After the accord was signed, he had requested a transfer to Earth. He wanted to understand these humans who had changed everything. He wanted to learn how they thought, how they lived, what made them different from every other species the hegemony had encountered. 50 years later, he was still learning. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Young human woman entered. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Fleet with admiral stars on her collar. Her name was Alina Vance, and she was the granddaughter of the woman who had once held Yithel's life in her hands. Ambassador, are you ready? The ceremony starts in an hour. Yithel turned from the window. I am ready, though I confess I am not sure why they want me there. I was the enemy 50 years ago. Alina smiled. That's exactly why they want you there. You represent how far we've come. An enemy who became an ally. A warrior who became a diplomat. Your presence means something. She walked to stand beside him at the window, looking Out at the blue and green planet that had changed the galaxy, my grandmother talked about you sometimes. In her final years, she said you asked good questions. She said you were the first hegemony member who really tried to understand us. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. I never met anyone quite like her. She was, and she believed in what we're building here. Right up until the end. Elena paused. She also said something else. She said, the hardest part wasn't winning the war. It was making sure we didn't become like the enemies we defeated. Yithral nodded slowly. I have seen what happens when victors become conquerors. They start as liberators and end as tyrants. Your species has avoided that trap so far. We've tried. It hasn't been easy. There are people who think we should have destroyed the hegemony when we had the chance. People who think we showed too much mercy. And what do you think? Elena was quiet for a moment. I think mercy was the right choice. I think we proved something to the galaxy that day. We proved that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. We proved that power can be used for something other than domination. She looked at him with eyes that reminded him very much of her grandmother. We proved that humanity was worth saving. The ceremony took place at the memorial site on Luna. It was a simple place, a black obelisk standing in a crater surrounded by smaller monuments. The obelisk bore the names of everyone who had served in Project Consequence, from the first scientists who had designed the weapons to the soldiers who had crewed the ships in that final battle. Thousands of people had gathered for the 50th anniversary. Humans, of course, but also members of dozens of other species, former enemies, former slaves, all of them united by the events of half a century ago. Fleet Admiral Elena Vance stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd behind her. Earth hung in the black sky like a promise. 50 years ago she began. This species faced extinction. An empire that had conquered 300 worlds came to our doorstep with a simple demand: surrender or die. She paused, letting the words sink in. Our ancestors had a different answer. They spent 50 years preparing for that moment. They built ships and weapons and trained soldiers. They sacrificed their careers and their families and sometimes their lives, all for a threat that might never come. They did this because they believed that humanity deserved to survive. They believed that we had something to offer the galaxy. She looked at the names on the obelisk. These people are heroes, not because they were brave, though they were, not because they were strong, though they were that too. They are heroes because they understood something important, that the future is not something that happens to you, it's something you build. She turned to face the crowd directly. 50 years ago we built a fleet that could destroy worlds. Today we have used that power to rebuild them. 50 years ago we faced an enemy that wanted to enslave us. Today we work side by side with their descendants. 50 years ago we were alone in the galaxy. Today we have allies and partners and friends on a 100 different worlds. This is what our ancestors fought for. Not victory, not revenge, not dominance. They fought for the chance to build something better, and I believe we have honored their sacrifice. The applause started slowly and built to a roar. Elena stepped back from the podium and found Ambassador Yithal waiting for her. That was a good speech, he said. Thank you, I meant every word. They walked together away from the crowd, toward a quieter section of the Memorial here, smaller monuments. Honored specific people and events. One of them bore the image of Helena Vance, the first fleet admiral who had died 15 years ago at the age of 92, I think. About her often, Ythel said, looking at the monument. I have lived for centuries and met countless leaders, but I have never met anyone quite like your grandmother. What made her different? Ythel thought about the question for a long time. She understood power. She understood it better than anyone I have ever known. She knew that power is not just about what you can do, it is about what you choose not to do. He turned to face Alina when she had my fleet at her mercy. She could have destroyed us. She could have executed every survivor. She could have started a war of revenge that would have burned across the galaxy. Instead, she showed mercy. She sent us home with a message instead of a death sentence. Why do you think she did that? Because she knew that killing us would not make humanity safe. It would only prove that humans were just as brutal as everyone else. She wanted to prove something different. She wanted to prove that humanity was better. Alina smiled. Sadly, she wasn't sure we were. She told me once that she was terrified the whole time, terrified that she was making a mistake, terrified that the hegemony would see mercy as weakness and attack again, but she did it anyway. Yes, she did it anyway. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the monument. I have studied your species for 50 years. Ythra said finally. I have learned history, your languages, your cultures. I have tried to understand what makes you different from every other species. The hegemony encountered, have you figured it out? Ythral made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, every time I think I understand, you surprise me again. But I have a theory. Tell me. You carry violence in your blood. Your world was dangerous, and you survived by being dangerous too. You are capable of terrible destruction. We saw that in the Battle of Seoul. He paused. But you also carry something else, hope perhaps, or stubbornness, or maybe just a refusal to accept that things have to stay the way they are. You look at the galaxy and you don't see it as it is. You see it as it could be. Is that good or bad? I think it is rare. Most species accept the galaxy as they find it. They adapt to the rules that already exist. Humans look at the rules and say, we can do better, and then somehow, against all odds, you do. Alina looked up at Earth, hanging in the sky above them. We've made a lot of mistakes over the years. We've done terrible things to each other and to our world. Sometimes I wonder if we deserve all this, if we earned it, or if we just got lucky. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe not. They started walking back toward the ceremony. The crowd was beginning to disperse. Groups of different species mixing and talking, sharing food and stories. What happens next? Yeth asked. Where does humanity go from here? Alina smiled. Outward. Always outward. There are still billions of stars we haven't visited, civilizations we haven't met, questions we haven't answered, and threats you haven't faced. Yes, those too. Her smile faded slightly. We still don't know what's out there beyond the space we've explored. We still don't know why the galaxy was so quiet for so long. We're better prepared than we were 50 years ago. But the universe is very large. Exactly. They reached the edge of the memorial site. Shuttles were arriving to take guests back to their ships, their homes, their worlds. I should go, Yi said. I have meetings tomorrow, trade, negotiations, cultural exchange, programs, the boring work of maintaining Peace, the most important work, Elena. Corrected. Wars end quickly. Peace takes forever. Your grandmother said something similar once. She was a wise woman. Ythel started toward the shuttle, then stopped and turned back. Fleet Admiral, there is something I have wanted to say. For 50 years, I never found the right moment. What is it? The old alien was quiet for a moment. His dark eyes reflected the light from Earth and the stars beyond. Thank you, Elena blinked. For what? For everything. For defeating us and sparing us. For showing us that there was another way to live. For refusing to become what we were. He paused. The hegemony was dying. Fleet Admiral, we had been dying for thousands of years. Even if we didn't know it, you could have ended us quickly. Instead, you gave us a chance to become something new. We gave you a choice. You made the decision. Yes, but you made the decision possible. He straightened somehow, looking less old, less tired. My species spent 60,000 years conquering the galaxy. We thought we were the masters of everything. We were wrong. You taught us that, and for that lesson I will always be grateful. He turned and walked toward the waiting shuttle. Elena watched him go, feeling the weight of 50 years of history in her chest. When he was gone, she turned back to look at the memorial. The black obelisk stood silent against the stars, names carved in its surface, a testament to everyone who had prepared for a day that might never come. They had been ready when the test came. Humanity had passed, not just by winning, but by choosing what kind of winner they wanted to be. Above her, ships from a dozen different species moved through the sky, their running lights blinking in peaceful patterns. Human ships and hegemony ships and ships from species that had been slaves a generation ago, all of them sharing the same stars. This was what victory looked like. Not conquest, not domination, not revenge, partnership, cooperation, hope. Elena Vance, granddaughter of the woman who had faced down an empire, looked up at the galaxy and smiled. There were still dangers out there. There always would be. The universe was vast and dark and full of things that humanity had never seen, but whatever came next, they would face it together. Earth had sent one final warning, and the galaxy had listened. Now it was time to build something worth protecting. Far away in a region of space that humanity had not yet explored, something stirred. It was old, older than the hegemony, older than any civilization that currently existed. It had slept for millions of years, waiting for something to wake it. And now faintly it sensed something new in the galaxy, a ripple in the pattern, a species that had risen faster than expected, that had defeated an ancient enemy that was spreading across the stars with unusual speed. Something considered this information. Then it went back to sleep, but not as deeply as before, and in its dreams it began to